What have you discovered around how different sleep levels of arousal impact perception and judgment? One of
Oh,
the
I
things
mean,
when I'm all
yeah,
being mindfulness, it's recognizing that it helps us develop this kind of sense of emotional balance that improves perception, judgment, and therefore goal achievement. So I'm curious, like, do you have a map or model to understand how a certain emotional state or level of arousal changes perceptions and judgment? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, sleep is huge. I mean, it's just,
Yep.
I have seen some of the most articulate, sort of balanced people. It just goes to shit when they don't sleep. Like it's just like you have to sleep. If you're not sleeping, and also like the big thing that like with all the work with my fiance and stuff is like there's a big difference between the amount of hours you sleep versus the quality of your sleep. So I think people think, oh, I slept 9 hours last night. You don't know what that quality necessarily looks like. Like it could be 9 hours and 5 hours of actual quality sleep where you're, you know, tapping into deep sleep or REM that are required to restore those functions. The other thing, so when I work with a lot of people, one of the things I really look for is I call it for the capacity for reframing.
Mhm.
I find reframing to be one of the most useful tools to
Yeah.
navigate life. And I'm always looking for like where a client is in that regard. And so some of these like I've talked to poker players that legitimately I get on the phone with them and they're telling they just lost like, over $1 million that night. And their tonality, it doesn't sound like they lost $1 million, right? They're still like pretty okay about it. And they're able to reframe it and zoom out and have the perspective to move them forward. So like that is my first coaching framework, is that like, what is your capacity to frame? And then the other one is establishing reality of situations. So like we attach a lot of meaning to certain situations and a lot of meaning things. So I listen very carefully to people's language and I'm like, what meaning are they making out of things? And for me, when, at least in my practice or what I do, when I have the inability to frame plus making meaning out of things that are, and they're not catching it, it's like a warning sign that this is not like, you're not in the right space right now. Like we have to take you off the table.
Let's dive into this a little bit more. I love this, Blake. So as far as let's start with reframing, and if
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can almost look at it through like a cognitive behavioral uh,
Yeah.
distortions, right? Cognitive biases that come up when someone's underslept or under or over aroused. So let's dive into that, and then the meaning part. I think logotherapy, and finding,
Mm-hmm.
through Viktor Frankl's work
I mean,
around.
that's like the best, that's like the best example of it. I mean, I mean, he's the goat of that. Like,
Exactly. So
you
let's
know,
dive into that. So what cognitive distortions or unhelpful thinking styles do you see more prominent in a underslept executive or poker player? Like what are the things you look out for and maybe are most detrimental to hyper?
so
Yeah.
yeah. So okay. So this is what's interesting. So high performers that I've worked with, they're not, you have to be hyper aware because I don't feel like it's rare that I get on the phone with them and they're like in a completely distorted narrative. It's not, it's not like, oh my God, like, what do you, it's subtle. It's really subtle. It's like they say things that they normally don't say. They'll like, they slip like, I just can't believe this is happening. Just like a little slip up. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like, all right, they're probably being on their best behavior because they know I'm listening and so on and so forth. But it's trying to capture, I believe, those like little subtleties, which are for that person. So for me, I look for like themes of victim-based mentality, right? Like they just feel like something's out to get them. I also look for, I start immediately when I hear things like that, I go towards not the playing field. So if somebody talks about having a really rough session or a really rough meeting, like the first thing I do is explore like family, social, like all the outside dynamics that I believe are like exasperants for those particular things. And then we start to go there and we basically, I can't tell you the amount of times that it's like, yeah, things are not going well at home. It's like, okay, so let's, and we start going down that rabbit hole and little things start to add up to massive cognitive distortions where now they have the lens that like everything in life is just not working for them. And sometimes when somebody's in their own head, and I mean, I have 3 coaches that I work with to prevent myself from doing this. I mean, I think that's why you need a coach in your life often, is because you don't have the perspective. Right before this call, I talked to one of my coaches, John Michael Morgan, and I'm saying something and he's like, well, and then I hear myself saying it. I'm like, yeah, that's not grounded in reality. Right. So, a lot of it is, I don't believe a lot of problems from high performers come from like they're masters of their craft. Like it's what's going on that you're not telling me, and what do we need to do to affect that? And being able to carve and cut that out and hold them accountable, and just also sometimes just make sure that I'm there for them and know that I will hold them accountable helps as well.
Beautiful.
And also it's hard, like when you're coaching, like I'm a very frameworks based person, like all my work is grounded in frameworks, and it's like the higher framework, everything falls into. But sometimes you just see something, it's like a subtlety, and you're like, nah, this person needs a little bit more love today. This person needs a little bit, but listen, man, this person needs like, no, toughen up and let's go. It's a way more dynamic thing than I think most people realize. And I use behavior to guide my coaching. Like sometimes if I'm like, this person's going to end this call in tears today. Like that's what they need. And sometimes it's enjoyment.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.